Sergeant Kozlov's radio crackled with static as bullets whined overhead, chipping concrete from the abandoned warehouse wall. His team had been pinned down for 47 minutes, and their extraction pilot lay somewhere in the burning wreckage of a Black Hawk 3 clicks north. The enemy had them surrounded on 3 sides, and ammunition was running dangerously low. Petty Officer Chen pressed against the wall beside him, blood seeping through a makeshift bandage on his shoulder. "We're not walking out of this one, Sarge," he muttered, checking his magazine for the 3rd time in 5 minutes. The other 4 team members crouched in defensive positions, their faces grim as automatic weapons fire echoed through the compound. Kozlov keyed his radio one final time, broadcasting on the emergency frequency. "Any friendly aircraft in the vicinity. This is SEAL Team Bravo requesting immediate extraction. We are surrounded and taking heavy fire at grid reference 77 Alphaner. Our pilot is down. Repeat, pilot is down and we need immediate assistance." Static filled the airwaves for long seconds. Chen shook his head and muttered something about dying in this godforsaken place. The rest of the team exchanged looks that said everything about their chances. 3 tours between them, and they all knew what radio silence meant in a situation like this. Then a voice came through the static, crisp and calm despite the chaos below. "SEAL Team Bravo, this is Phantom 17. I copy your request for extraction. What is your current tactical situation?" Kozlov frowned at his radio, then keyed the mic again. "Phantom 17, identify your aircraft type and pilot credentials. We need immediate heavy lift capability for 6 personnel under fire." The voice responded without hesitation. "Phantom 17 is currently airborne in your vicinity. I can provide extraction, but you need to move to the north side of your building in 90 seconds. Enemy forces are massing for an assault on your current position." Chen grabbed Kozlov's arm. "Sarge, there's no Phantom 17 on our flight manifest. That aircraft designation doesn't exist in our operational database." He lowered his voice to barely above a whisper. "And how the hell does some random pilot know our exact tactical situation?" Staff Sergeant Morrison crawled over from his position near the window, keeping low as bullets shattered glass above him. "I've been monitoring all frequencies for the past hour. There's been no radio traffic from any Phantom aircraft." Morrison wiped sweat from his forehead, leaving a streak of dirt across his face. "Whoever this is, they're flying something that's supposed to be unmanned." The radio crackled again. "SEAL Team Bravo, you have 80 seconds to reach the north extraction point. I'm beginning my approach now, but you need to trust me and move immediately." Kozlov looked at his team, seeing the same skepticism reflected in every face. Petty Officer Rodriguez shook his head slowly. "Sarge, this smells like a trap. How does some mystery pilot in an unmanned aircraft think they're going to extract 6 combat-loaded SEALs from a hot landing zone?" Specialist Williams checked his weapon and grimaced. "Even if this Phantom pilot is legitimate, they've never dealt with this level of ground fire. Those reconnaissance drones aren't built for combat extraction." Williams gestured toward the windows where muzzle flashes lit up the gathering darkness. "That's not exactly a friendly airfield out there. Before we dive into this story, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe you've witnessed similar acts of courage where you're from." The sound of rotor blades began to build in the distance, growing steadily louder despite the ongoing firefight. Chun pressed his ear to the radio, listening intently. "That engine signature doesn't match any aircraft in our tactical database." He looked up at Kozlov with growing concern. "Sarge, whoever this is, they're flying something we've never seen before." Kozlov made the decision that would determine whether his team lived or died. "Team, we move to the north side in 60 seconds. Prep for immediate extraction under fire." He keyed his radio one more time. "Phantom 17, be advised we are moving to north extraction point, but we are taking heavy enemy fire from multiple positions. Are you certain you can handle a hot extraction with 6 personnel?" The mysterious voice responded with absolute confidence that somehow made Kozlov even more nervous. "SEAL Team Bravo, I've handled worse. Just be ready to move fast when I touch down." This is going to be close. Morrison grabbed his gear and shook his head. Sarge, I've seen a lot of extractions go wrong. This Phantom pilot better be as good as they think they are, because if they're not, we're all dead in the next 5 minutes. The rotor noise grew louder, and somewhere in the darkness above, an aircraft approached that would either save their lives or seal their fate. Kozlov had 40 seconds to find out which one it would be. The team moved through the smoke-filled building toward the north side, their boots crunching on broken glass and debris. Kozlov led the way, his rifle sweeping corners while the mysterious aircraft's engine noise grew steadily louder overhead. The sound was unlike anything he had heard in 15 years of military service, a deep thrumming that seemed to vibrate through the concrete walls. Chun stumbled slightly, his wounded shoulder throwing off his balance as they navigated around overturned furniture and scattered equipment. This Phantom pilot better know what they're doing, because we're about to be completely exposed on that north side. He winced as another burst of automatic weapons fire echoed from somewhere behind them. Those enemy positions have clear sight lines to any landing zone. Phantom 17's voice crackled through the radio again, maintaining that unervingly calm tone despite the chaos below. SEAL Team Bravo, I have visual on enemy positions. Count approximately 20 hostiles in prepared fighting positions surrounding your building. Be advised, extraction will require precision timing. Rodriguez keyed his radio while keeping his weapon trained on a doorway. Phantom 17, what is your aircraft type and crew complement? We need to know your capabilities before we commit to this extraction. There was a brief pause before the response came. SEAL Team Bravo, focus on reaching the extraction point. Aircraft specifications are not relevant to your current tactical situation. Morrison shook his head and muttered to Williams, that's not an answer, that's an evasion. No legitimate pilot refuses to identify their aircraft type during an emergency extraction. He checked his ammunition count and frowned. Something about this whole situation feels wrong. Williams peered through a broken window toward the north side of the building, studying the terrain. Sarge, that landing zone is maybe 30 meters of open ground with no cover. If this Phantom pilot miscalculates their approach by even 10 seconds, we're sitting ducks for every enemy shooter in the area. The aircraft noise suddenly shifted, becoming more directional as the mysterious pilot began their approach. Kozlov could see his team's faces in the dim light filtering through the windows, and none of them looked confident about their chances. Specialist Torres, who had remained silent during most of the firefight, finally spoke up. I've worked with every extraction pilot in this theater of operations, and I've never heard that call sign or that engine signature. Torres adjusted his gear and looked directly at Kozlov. Sarge, whoever this is, they're not from any unit we've worked with before. How do we know they can handle a combat extraction? The radio crackled again. SEAL Team Bravo, 30 seconds to extraction point. Be prepared for immediate boarding when I touch down. Window for extraction is approximately 15 seconds before enemy forces adjust their fire. Chun pressed against the wall near what had once been a loading dock door, now partially collapsed from earlier explosions. 15 seconds? He looked back at his teammates with obvious skepticism. Most combat extractions take at least 30 to 40 seconds just to get everyone aboard safely. This Phantom pilot thinks they could do it in 15? Rodriguez moved to the opposite side of the doorway, his rifle ready. And how exactly does this mystery pilot plan to land in a space that's barely large enough for a small helicopter? He gestured toward the cramped area visible beyond the debris. That landing zone wasn't designed for aircraft operations. The engine noise reached a crescendo directly overhead, and suddenly the building shook as rotor wash began disturbing loose debris throughout the structure. Kozlov felt the vibrations through his boots and realized that whatever aircraft was approaching, it was significantly larger than he had expected. Morrison grabbed his radio. Phantom 17. That rotor signature indicates heavy lift capability. What exactly are you flying up there? The response came through clearly despite the increasing noise. SEAL Team Bravo, prepare for extraction. I'm beginning final approach now. Move to the north side immediately. Williams shouldered his pack and shook his head. Sarge, in all my years of combat operations, I've never seen an unidentified aircraft attempt a hot extraction without proper coordination with ground forces. He checked his weapon one more time. This Phantom pilot is either incredibly skilled or completely insane. Torres peered around the edge of the collapsed doorway, trying to get a visual on the approaching aircraft. I can see lights, but the configuration doesn't match anything in our recognition database. He pulled back as enemy muzzle flashes erupted from positions across the compound. Whoever this pilot is, they're coming in under heavy fire. The radio transmitted one final message as the aircraft descended toward the improvised landing zone. SEAL Team Bravo, 10 seconds to touchdown. Be ready to move fast. This extraction is going to be closer than any of you have experienced before. Kozlov looked at his team, seeing the same mixture of desperation and doubt in every face. They were committed now, with no other options remaining. In 10 seconds, they would discover whether their mysterious Phantom pilot possessed the skills necessary to save their lives, or whether they had just made the last mistake any of them would ever make. The aircraft materialized through the smoke like something from another world, its sleek profile cutting through the darkness with an almost supernatural grace. Kozlov had expected a standard military helicopter, but what descended toward their position defied every assumption he had made about their Phantom rescuer. The craft moved with a fluidity that seemed to bend the laws of physics, sliding sideways through the air to avoid incoming tracer rounds. Chun stared upward, his wounded shoulder forgotten as he watched the impossible aerial display. That's not flying, that's dancing. He keyed his radio with obvious disbelief. Phantom 17, how are you maneuvering like that under fire? That aircraft is moving in ways I've never seen before. The mysterious pilot's voice remained steady despite executing maneuvers that should have been impossible. SEAL Team Bravo, preparing for touchdown in 5 seconds. Be ready to move immediately upon landing. Rodriguez crouched beside the collapsed doorway, watching enemy muzzle flashes erupt from positions across the compound. The Phantom pilot was threading the aircraft between incoming fire streams with precision that bordered on precognitive. Those shooters have been trying to hit that aircraft for 30 seconds, and every shot is missing by inches. How is that even possible? Morrison grabbed Kozlov's arm as the aircraft settled toward the ground with movements so smooth they seemed choreographed. Sarge, I've seen the best pilots in the military, and nobody flies like that. He had to shout over the increasing rotor noise. Whoever this is, they're operating on a completely different level than anyone we've worked with. The landing was unlike anything the SEAL team had ever witnessed. Instead of the usual controlled crash that characterized most combat extractions, the Phantom aircraft touched down with the gentleness of a feather, its landing gear making contact so softly that debris barely shifted around the landing zone. Williams watched in amazement as the pilot held the aircraft perfectly stable despite ongoing enemy fire. That's impossible, Williams shouted to Torres over the engine noise. No pilot can maintain that level of stability in a hot landing zone with that much incoming fire. He shouldered his pack, preparing to run for the aircraft. This Phantom pilot is either using some kind of advanced flight system we don't know about, or they have skills that shouldn't exist. Torres was already moving toward the aircraft when he stopped suddenly, pointing at the cockpit configuration. Sarge, look at that aircraft design. I can barely make out the pilot through that canopy, and the entire flight system looks like nothing I've ever seen in military inventory. The radio crackled with the Phantom pilot's voice, still maintaining that eerie calm. SEAL Team Bravo, boarding time starts now. Move to the rear cargo area immediately. We have approximately 12 seconds before enemy forces adjust their aim. Chin ran toward the aircraft despite his shoulder wound, but he couldn't help expressing his continued doubts even as their rescue arrived. Phantom 17, your flying capabilities are beyond anything in our tactical database. What kind of training program produces piloting skills like that? The response came as the team reached the aircraft cargo bay. SEAL Team Bravo, Explanations will have to wait. Board immediately and prepare for combat departure. Kozlov was first to reach the aircraft, and what he saw inside the cargo bay only deepened his confusion. The interior configuration was unlike any military aircraft he had encountered, with technology and systems that seemed years ahead of standard military equipment. Rodriguez climbed in behind him, his eyes wide as he took in the advanced instrumentation. "This isn't standard military issue," Rodriguez called out to the others. "This aircraft has technology I've never seen before." He strapped himself into a seat that adjusted automatically to his body configuration. What kind of unit operates equipment like this? Morrison and Williams climbed aboard together, both of them staring at the sophisticated systems surrounding them. Williams ran his hand along a control panel that seemed to respond to his touch with subtle lights and displays. "Sarge, this Phantom pilot isn't just skilled, they're flying something that's decades ahead of anything we've been briefed about." The last two team members, Torres and the wounded Chun, scrambled into the cargo bay just as enemy fire began to concentrate on their position. Torres helped Chun into a seat, then looked around the aircraft interior with growing amazement. Everything about this aircraft screams advanced technology and unlimited funding. Who has access to equipment like this? The Phantom pilot's voice came through the aircraft's internal communication system. "SEAL Team Bravo, all personnel aboard. Preparing for immediate departure. Recommend securing all gear for aggressive evasive maneuvers." Chun, despite his pain, couldn't resist asking the question that was on everyone's mind. "Phantom 17, your aircraft and flying capabilities are unlike anything we've encountered. What military branch are you assigned to?" The response came as the aircraft began to lift off with the same impossible smoothness they had witnessed during landing. "SEAL Team Bravo, focus on the mission. We're not clear of enemy fire yet, and the next few minutes will determine whether this extraction succeeds or fails." The aircraft climbed rapidly through the night sky, its ascent so smooth that the transition from ground level to cruising altitude felt like riding in an elevator rather than flying in a combat zone. Kozlov studied the advanced instrumentation surrounding the passenger compartment, noting displays and interfaces that seemed decades ahead of any military technology he had encountered during his 15-year career. Torres was examining the aircraft's internal systems more closely, his technical background allowing him to appreciate the sophisticated integration of components that should have been impossible to manufacture with current technology. Phantom 17. This aircraft system's architecture represents technological advancement that exceeds anything in our current military inventory by decades. What research program developed these capabilities? The Phantom pilot's response came through the intercom with that same unnerving calm they had maintained throughout the extraction. "SEAL Team Bravo, aircraft specifications remain classified. Focus on mission completion rather than technology assessment." Williams was monitoring the tactical displays, watching their flight path as it adjusted automatically to avoid enemy patrol patterns that appeared in real time on screens. Those enemy positions are being tracked and analyzed by systems that process intelligence faster than our best tactical computers. He looked around at his teammates with growing amazement. This Phantom pilot has access to intelligence-gathering capabilities that operate at superhuman speeds. Rodriguez moved closer to the cockpit area, trying to observe their mysterious pilot through the barrier that separated the passenger compartment from the flight controls. "I can barely make out the pilot's silhouette, but their interaction with the aircraft systems appears to be completely seamless." He called back to his teammates. "It's like the pilot and aircraft are functioning as a single integrated unit." Morrison was studying the aircraft's performance data through the passenger interface, watching readings that fluctuated beyond the measurement capabilities of standard military instruments. "Our current airspeed and altitude readings are exceeding the performance specifications of any known military aircraft." He looked toward the cockpit with obvious concern. How is this Phantom pilot maintaining control at speeds that should be beyond human reaction capabilities? The aircraft suddenly banked to avoid a surface-to-air missile that appeared on the tactical display, The evasive maneuver executed with precision that seemed to anticipate the threat before the weapon systems had achieved target lock. Chen watched the missile streak past their position and shook his head in disbelief. That missile was launched from a position we hadn't even detected yet. How did this phantom pilot know to evade before the threat was visible? Torres was analyzing the aircraft's sensor systems, noting capabilities that exceeded anything he had encountered in his technical training. These detection and analysis systems are processing information from multiple spectrum sources simultaneously while predicting enemy behavior patterns. He gestured toward the displays, showing real-time tactical updates. This phantom pilot has access to intelligence capabilities that operate beyond current human processing limitations. The phantom pilot's voice came through the intercom as they continued their flight toward friendly territory. SEAL Team Bravo, enemy forces are deploying additional assets to intercept our flight path, adjusting course to avoid engagement while maintaining optimal arrival timing. Rodriguez pressed closer to the cockpit barrier, desperate to understand how their mysterious rescuer was processing tactical information at superhuman speeds. Phantom 1-7, your threat assessment and evasion capabilities are operating faster than our best tactical analysis systems. How are you processing multiple information streams simultaneously? Williams was watching the aircraft's navigation systems automatically plot courses that avoided enemy positions while optimizing fuel efficiency and flight time. The route planning is happening in real time with calculations that would require our best computers several minutes to complete. He looked around at his teammates. This phantom pilot is either using advanced artificial intelligence or possessing cognitive capabilities that transcend normal human limitations. Morrison studied the aircraft's defensive systems through the passenger interface, noting countermeasures and electronic warfare capabilities that seemed designed to operate against threats that hadn't been developed yet. These defensive systems are configured to counter weapons and detection methods that exceed current enemy capabilities. He looked toward the cockpit with growing amazement. This phantom pilot is operating technology that anticipates future threat developments. The aircraft executed another evasive maneuver, this time avoiding a coordinated missile attack from 3 different positions that appear to have been launched simultaneously. Chun watched the tactical display show their flight path weaving between overlapping threat zones with precision that seemed choreographed. Those enemy commanders coordinated a complex ambush, but this phantom pilot anticipated their strategy and countered it before the weapons reached effective range. Torres was examining the aircraft's power systems, trying to understand the energy requirements for the advanced capabilities they were witnessing. The energy consumption and generation systems are operating at efficiency levels that exceed theoretical maximums for current technology. He looked around at the sophisticated equipment surrounding them. This phantom pilot is managing power distribution and system integration that should require multiple operators and advanced computer assistance. The phantom pilot's voice came through the intercom as they approached another potential threat zone. SEAL Team Bravo, enemy air defense systems are attempting to establish firing solutions on our position. Recommend preparing for extended evasive maneuvering as we transit through contested airspace. Rodriguez was still trying to observe their pilot through the cockpit barrier, noting movements that seemed to flow with supernatural precision and timing. The pilot's interaction with aircraft controls appears to be completely intuitive, like they're thinking the aircraft through 3-dimensional space. He called back to his teammates. This phantom pilot is operating with human-machine integration that exceeds anything we've been briefed about in advanced military programs. The aircraft's warning systems activated as multiple enemy radar installations locked onto their position, painting their flight path with targeting beams that should have made evasion impossible. Kozlov watched the threat indicators illuminate the passenger compartment with pulsing amber light, counting at least 12 different weapons systems tracking their movement through hostile airspace. Chun was monitoring the tactical displays when he noticed something that made his blood run cold. Phantom 1-7 were showing coordinated targeting from air defense systems across a 50-kilometer radius. Those enemy commanders have created overlapping fields of fire that no conventional aircraft should be able to penetrate. The Phantom pilot's response came with that same unervingly confident tone they had maintained throughout their rescue mission. SEAL Team Bravo, enemy coordination patterns are within acceptable parameters for penetration. Maintaining current flight path toward friendly airspace. Rodriguez pressed against the cockpit barrier, watching their mysterious pilot's movements as they prepared to navigate through what appeared to be certain destruction. Acceptable parameters? He called back to his teammates. We're looking at a coordinated air defense network that would challenge an entire squadron of stealth fighters. How does this Phantom pilot expect to survive alone? Morrison was studying the enemy force deployment through the aircraft's intelligence systems, noting tactical dispositions that suggested months of preparation for exactly this type of intercept mission. Sarge, those enemy positions aren't randomly placed. They've been positioned specifically to create an inescapable kill zone for any aircraft attempting to transit this airspace. Williams watched the aircraft's defensive systems begin to activate, noting electronic warfare capabilities that started jamming enemy communications while simultaneously analyzing their tactical coordination methods. This Phantom pilot isn't just evading enemy fire, they're disrupting their command and control systems in real time. He looked around at his teammates. The electronic warfare capabilities alone represent technology advancement beyond anything in our current inventory. Torres was examining the aircraft's sensor systems as they provided detailed analysis of enemy weapons capabilities and firing solutions. These detection systems are not only tracking enemy positions, but predicting their engagement protocols and identifying optimal countermeasures. He gestured toward the displays, showing real-time tactical intelligence. This Phantom pilot has access to battlefield analysis capabilities that operate at superhuman processing speeds. The first wave of surface-to-air missiles erupted from enemy positions. Their launch is coordinated to create overlapping intercept vectors that should have guaranteed destruction. Chun watched the tactical display show 8 missiles converging on their position and felt his stomach drop. Those missiles are using advanced guidance systems with multiple targeting modes. Even if we evade the first salvo, they'll adjust their approach vectors for secondary attacks. The Phantom pilot's voice came through the intercom as the missiles approached terminal guidance phase. SEAL Team Bravo, beginning defensive maneuvering sequence. Recommend securing all personnel for aggressive evasion tactics. Rodriguez felt the aircraft begin to move in ways that seemed to defy basic principles of aerodynamics, sliding sideways through three-dimensional space while maintaining forward momentum. We're not following normal flight dynamics anymore. He gripped his seat restraints as impossible forces built and dissipated without apparent cause. This Phantom pilot is operating with capabilities that transcend conventional aircraft performance limitations. Morrison was monitoring the aircraft's performance indicators, watching readings that fluctuated beyond the measurement range of the instruments. Our velocity vectors are changing in multiple directions simultaneously without following predictable flight patterns. He looked toward the cockpit with growing amazement. This Phantom pilot is either using technology that manipulates physics or possessing abilities that exceed normal human limitations. Williams watched the enemy missiles pass harmlessly through airspace they had occupied moments before, their guidance systems apparently unable to track an aircraft that moved through three-dimensional space in impossible ways. Those missiles are designed to intercept the most advanced military aircraft, but their targeting positions were no longer occupying. He shook his head in disbelief. This Phantom pilot is operating in dimensions that enemy targeting systems can't calculate. The aircraft continued through the missile barrage with movements so fluid they seemed choreographed, each evasive maneuver flowing seamlessly into the next while maintaining progress toward friendly territory. Torres felt the impossible physics of their flight and struggled to understand the technology enabling such capabilities. We're experiencing forces that should be tearing the aircraft apart, but somehow the structural integrity remains perfect throughout these maneuvers. A second wave of missiles launched from concealed positions, adding another layer of deadly threats to the already impossible tactical situation. Chun counted 12 additional weapons converging on their position and realized that no conventional pilot could possibly survive the overlapping kill zones. This Phantom pilot is facing concentrated firepower that would destroy an entire flight formation, and they're treating it like a routine training exercise. The Phantom pilot's voice remained calm as they navigated through increasingly lethal concentrations of enemy fire. SEAL Team Bravo. Enemy forces are deploying reserve assets to intercept our flight path. Anticipate additional defensive measures as we approach the final transit zone. Rodriguez was still trying to observe their pilot through the cockpit barrier, noting that their movements remained fluid and precise despite executing maneuvers that should have been impossible under extreme stress. This Phantom pilot is maintaining perfect control while performing maneuvers that violate every principle of flight dynamics we've been taught. He looked around at his teammates. Either we're witnessing the most advanced military technology ever developed, or our rescuer possesses capabilities that transcend normal human limitations. The aircraft banked sharply to avoid another surface-to-air missile, the maneuver so violent that it should have thrown everyone against the bulkheads. Instead, the advanced stabilization systems kept the passenger compartment level while the world spun outside the windows. Kozlov watched the missile streak past their position, missing by what appeared to be mere feet, and felt his stomach drop as he realized how close they had come to destruction. Chun pressed his face against the window, watching the ground blur beneath them as the Phantom pilot executed another impossible evasive sequence. Phantom 17. We just evaded 3 SAM launches in 90 seconds. How are you anticipating their targeting solutions? The mysterious pilot's response came through the intercom system, still maintaining that unnervingly calm tone. SEAL Team Bravo. Enemy forces are using predictable engagement patterns. Standard evasion protocols are sufficient for this threat level. Rodriguez unbuckled himself and moved toward the cockpit area, trying to get a better view of their pilot. Standard protocols? He shouted back to his teammates over the engine noise. I've never seen evasion maneuvers like that in 15 years of combat operations. Whoever this is, they're not using any standard anything. Morrison gripped his seat as the aircraft suddenly dropped 300 feet in a controlled dive that avoided another incoming missile. The forces should have been crushing, but somehow the aircraft's systems compensated for the extreme maneuvers. Sarge, this Phantom pilot is pulling maneuvers that should be killing us, but we're barely feeling the effects. What kind of aircraft technology can do that? Williams watched the tactical display screen built into the bulkhead, seeing enemy positions marked in real time with precision that seemed impossible. The aircraft's sensors were tracking individual enemy soldiers across a 5-kilometer radius, showing their exact positions and movement patterns. This isn't just advanced flying, Williams called out to the others. This aircraft has intelligence gathering capabilities that are decades ahead of anything in our inventory. Torres studied the interior systems more carefully, noting details that had escaped his attention during their frantic boarding. Every control surface and display in this aircraft responds instantly to the pilot's commands. He ran his hand along a panel that showed their flight path with incredible precision. The technology integration is seamless, like the pilot and aircraft are functioning as a single unit. The Phantom pilot's voice interrupted their observations. SEAL Team Bravo, we are approaching contested airspace. Enemy forces have additional surface-to-air assets in this sector. Recommend preparing for extended evasive action. Chun looked at his teammates with growing concern about their situation. Extended evasive action? How much fuel does this mystery aircraft carry? He tried to calculate their distance from friendly territory. We're still 40 kilometers from safe airspace, and this Phantom pilot has been flying aggressive maneuvers for the past 20 minutes. Rodriguez finally reached a position where he could see partially into the cockpit area, but what he observed only deepened his confusion. I can barely make out our pilot from this angle. but the control interface looks like something from a science fiction movie. He called back to Kozlov. "Sarge, there are no manual flight controls that I can see. Everything appears to be operated through some kind of advanced interface." Morrison was studying the tactical situation through another display screen, watching enemy forces scramble to intercept their flight path. Those enemy units are deploying in response patterns, trying to cut off our escape routes. He looked around at his teammates. How is this phantom pilot staying ahead of coordinated ground-to-air defensive systems? The aircraft suddenly accelerated, pushing everyone back into their seats despite the advanced stabilization technology. Williams felt the pressure and shook his head in disbelief. We just went from 200 to 400 kilometers per hour in less than 10 seconds. That kind of acceleration should have knocked us unconscious. Torres was monitoring the aircraft systems through the passenger interface, watching energy readings and flight parameters that meant nothing to him. These power levels and performance specifications don't match any aircraft in our technical databases. He looked at Kozlov with obvious concern. "Sarge, whoever this phantom pilot is, they're operating technology that shouldn't exist." The intercom crackled with another transmission from their mysterious rescuer. "SEAL Team Bravo, enemy forces are attempting to establish a blocking position ahead of our current flight path. Adjusting course to avoid engagement. Estimated time to friendly airspace is now 18 minutes. Chun, despite his wounded shoulder, leaned forward to address the cockpit area directly. "Phantom 17, your aircraft capabilities and piloting skills are unlike anything we've encountered in our military careers. What organization has access to technology this advanced?" The response came after a pause that seemed longer than usual. "SEAL Team Bravo, focus on reaching safe territory. Operational details are classified above your security clearance level." Rodriguez turned back to his teammates with a grim expression. "Did you hear that? Classified above our security clearance?" He lowered his voice so only the team could hear. "We're SEAL team operators with some of the highest clearance levels in the military. What kind of organization operates above our classification level?" Morrison checked his weapon and gear, preparing for whatever might come next. "This phantom pilot just told us that their operation is so classified that even special operations personnel don't have access to information about it." He looked around at his teammates. "That means we're dealing with something completely outside normal military command structure." The aircraft's warning systems began to illuminate the passenger compartment with pulsing red lights as multiple threat indicators appeared on the tactical displays. Kozlov watched the screens with growing alarm as enemy forces converged from three directions, their anti-aircraft systems coordinating to create an impenetrable wall of defensive fire directly in their flight path. Chin studied the threat assessment readout. His face paled despite his years of combat experience. "Phantom 17, we're looking at coordinated surface-to-air missile batteries, mobile anti-aircraft guns, and fighter aircraft converging on our position. How do you plan to navigate through that kind of concentrated firepower?" The Phantom pilot's response came with the same unnerving calm they had maintained throughout the extraction. "SEAL Team Bravo, enemy defensive coordination is within acceptable parameters for penetration. Recommend securing all personnel for aggressive maneuvering sequence." Rodriguez shook his head as he watched the tactical display update in real time, showing enemy forces moving into blocking positions. "Acceptable parameters?" He called out to his teammates. "We're looking at a coordinated air defense network that would challenge an entire squadron of fighter aircraft. This Phantom pilot thinks they can fly through it alone?" Morrison gripped his seat restraints as the aircraft began to climb rapidly, gaining altitude for what appeared to be an impossible run through the enemy defensive screen. "Sarge, in all my years of military operations, I've never seen a single aircraft attempt to penetrate this level of coordinated air defense." He looked around at his teammates with obvious concern. This Phantom pilot is either completely insane or they know something about their aircraft capabilities that we don't understand. Williams monitored the enemy force dispositions through the passenger interface, watching mobile units race to establish firing positions along their projected flight path. Those enemy commanders are deploying assets specifically designed to stop high-performance aircraft. He turned to Kozlov with growing anxiety. How does this mystery pilot expect to survive concentrated fire from systems designed to down fighter jets? The aircraft suddenly accelerated again, this time pushing everyone deep into their seats as forces built beyond anything they had experienced during the extraction. Torres felt the pressure against his chest and struggled to speak. We're pulling GS that should be impossible for this aircraft configuration. He managed to look at the performance displays. These readings show we're exceeding the design limitations of any known military aircraft. The intercom crackled with the Phantom pilot's voice as they approached the enemy defensive line. SEAL Team Bravo, beginning penetration sequence in 30 seconds. Recommend preparing for extended high-G maneuvering. This will be more intense than previous evasion sequences. Chun tried to raise his head against the mounting forces, his wounded shoulder screaming in protest. More intense? He could barely get the words out. We're already experiencing forces that should be crushing us. How much more can this aircraft and pilot handle? Rodriguez was watching the forward tactical display, seeing enemy weapon systems lock onto their position as they approached the defensive screen. Multiple targeting radars have acquired us. Those missile batteries are achieving firing solutions. He looked back at his teammates with genuine fear in his eyes. This Phantom pilot is flying straight into a coordinated trap with no visible plan for survival. Morrison tried to calculate their odds of surviving the next few minutes, but the mathematics were beyond hopeful. Sarge, we're looking at overlapping fields of fire from systems specifically designed to prevent aircraft penetration. He checked his gear one more time, preparing for the worst. Even if this Phantom pilot has skills beyond anything we've seen, the physics of this situation are working against us. The warning alarms in the passenger compartment reached a crescendo as enemy targeting systems achieved multiple locks on their aircraft. Williams watched the threat indicators with growing horror. We have 17 different weapon systems tracking us simultaneously. Those enemy commanders have created a kill zone that no single aircraft should be able to survive. Torres was studying the aircraft's defensive systems through the passenger interface, trying to understand what countermeasures their Phantom pilot might deploy. I can see defensive system indicators, but nothing that explains how we're going to survive this level of concentrated firepower. He looked around at his teammates. This Phantom pilot better have capabilities we can't even imagine, because conventional tactics won't work here. The Phantom pilot's voice came through the intercom one final time before they entered the enemy defensive screen. SEAL Team Bravo, beginning penetration now. Maintain secure positions and prepare for maneuvers beyond your previous experience. The next 3 minutes will determine our survival. Kozlov felt the aircraft bank into what could only be described as an impossible turn, beginning a sequence of maneuvers that defied everything he understood about aerodynamics and aircraft performance. He looked at his team members, seeing the same mixture of terror and awe in every face. They were about to discover whether their Phantom pilot possessed abilities that transcended normal human limitations, or whether they had just committed to a course of action that would end all their lives in the next few minutes. Chun gripped his seat restraints and closed his eyes as the aircraft dove toward the enemy defensive line. This Phantom pilot is either about to perform the most incredible flying demonstration in military history, or we're all about to die in the most spectacular fashion possible. The first wave of missiles erupted from the enemy defensive line like deadly fireworks, streaking toward their aircraft with trails of smoke that painted deadly arcs across the sky. Kozlov watched through the window as 17 surface-to-air missiles converged on their position, each one guided by sophisticated targeting systems that should have guaranteed their destruction within seconds. Then the Phantom pilot did something that violated every law of physics Kozlov understood. The aircraft seemed to fold in on itself, contracting into a configuration that allowed the missiles to pass through spaces where the aircraft had been moments before. Chun pressed his face against the window, watching in stunned disbelief as missiles streaked past their position. missing by distances that seemed measured in inches rather than feet. "That's impossible," Chen shouted over the alarm systems. "We just occupied the same airspace as those missiles without colliding." He looked around at his teammates with wild eyes. How is this phantom pilot manipulating space and time like that? Rodriguez was monitoring the tactical displays, watching their aircraft's position relative to the incoming threats. According to these instruments, we're moving through three-dimensional space in ways that shouldn't be possible. He pointed at the readouts showing their flight path. We're changing direction and velocity simultaneously without following normal flight dynamics. The second wave of enemy fire erupted as anti-aircraft guns opened up with streams of tracer rounds that created a web of deadly light across their flight path. Morrison watched the barrage approach and calculated that no aircraft could possibly navigate through the overlapping fields of fire. "Sarge, those gun positions have created a wall of lead that extends for 2 kilometers. There's no gap large enough for any aircraft to penetrate." The Phantom pilot's response came through the intercom as they dove directly into the most concentrated area of enemy fire. "SEAL Team Bravo, entering maximum threat zone now. Recommend maintaining secure positions for extreme maneuvering sequence." Williams felt the aircraft begin to move in ways that his inner ear couldn't process, as if they were sliding sideways through reality itself while tracer rounds streamed past their windows. "We're not flying anymore. We're dancing between bullets." He gripped his seat restraints as the forces shifted in multiple directions simultaneously. This Phantom pilot is operating in dimensions beyond normal space. Torres was studying the aircraft's performance indicators, watching readings that fluctuated beyond the measurement capabilities of the instruments. "Our velocity and direction vectors are changing faster than the measurement systems can track." He looked at the tactical display, showing their position relative to enemy fire. "According to these readings, we're occupying multiple positions simultaneously." The third wave of threats materialized as enemy fighter aircraft appeared on their sensors, closing rapidly from multiple vectors with weapons armed and targeting systems locked. Chun watched the approaching fighters and shook his head in despair. Those are frontline interceptor aircraft with pilots trained specifically for air-to-air combat. How does this Phantom pilot expect to outmaneuver dedicated fighter jets? The enemy fighters opened fire with air-to-air missiles, adding another layer of deadly threats to the barrage already filling the airspace around them. Rodriguez counted 6 missiles incoming from the fighter aircraft, while anti-aircraft systems continued their coordinated barrage. "We now have 23 different weapons systems firing at us simultaneously. No pilot in history has survived this level of concentrated firepower." Morrison was pressed against his seat as the aircraft executed maneuvers that seemed to bend the fundamental laws of motion. "We're pulling forces in directions that don't exist." He tried to focus on the tactical displays, but the readings were fluctuating beyond comprehension. This Phantom pilot isn't just skilled. They're operating with capabilities that transcend normal human limitations. The aircraft suddenly seemed to fragment into multiple positions, each one drawing fire from different enemy systems, while the real aircraft slipped between the overlapping defensive screens. Williams watched in amazement as tracer rounds passed through spaces they had occupied moments before. "We're not evading enemy fire. We're making them shoot at shadows." Torres felt the aircraft's movements become even more impossible as they approached the heart of the enemy defensive network. These maneuvers are violating basic principles of aerodynamics and physics. He looked around at his teammates with growing awe. This Phantom pilot is demonstrating capabilities that shouldn't exist in any known aircraft or human operator. The Phantom pilot's voice came through the intercom as they reached the most dangerous section of their penetration run. "SEAL Team Bravo, maximum threat exposure in 15 seconds. Preparing for final evasion sequence that will exceed all previous maneuver parameters." Chen tried to prepare himself for whatever was coming next, but realized that nothing in his military experience had equipped him to understand what they were witnessing. This phantom pilot is about to attempt something that goes beyond impossible into the realm of miraculous. He looked at his wounded shoulder, then at his teammates. If we survive the next 30 seconds, we'll have witnessed flying that redefines what's possible. Kozlov felt the aircraft begin to move in ways that his mind couldn't process, as if they were slipping between the spaces and reality itself, while enemy weapons converged on their position from every direction. He closed his eyes and gripped his seat restraints, knowing that the next few moments would either demonstrate abilities beyond human comprehension or end all their lives in a spectacular display of physics-defying destruction. The enemy's final defensive line erupted in a coordinated barrage that turned the sky into a deadly constellation of explosions and tracer fire. Kozlov watched through the aircraft windows as the phantom pilot guided them in what could only be described as a corridor of death, where overlapping fields of fire from ground-based systems and pursuing fighter aircraft created a wall of destruction that no conventional aircraft could possibly survive. Chun pressed himself against the bulkhead as the aircraft began to move through the barrage in ways that his combat-trained mind couldn't comprehend. We're flying through solid walls of explosive ordnance. He watched missiles detonate around their position, close enough that the shockwaves should have torn their aircraft apart. How are we not being destroyed by those blast effects? The phantom pilot's voice remained impossibly calm as they navigated through the heart of the enemy's most concentrated firepower. SEAL Team Bravo, entering final threat zone. Recommend preparing for maneuvers that will exceed all known aircraft performance parameters. Rodriguez was staring at the tactical displays, watching their aircraft's signature move through enemy defensive screens that should have been impenetrable. According to these readings, we're simultaneously present and absent in multiple locations. He turned to his teammates with genuine terror in his eyes. This phantom pilot is manipulating reality itself to avoid incoming fire. Morrison felt the aircraft execute a maneuver that seemed to fold space around them, allowing enemy weapons to pass harmlessly through areas they had occupied microseconds before. We just moved through 3 dimensions simultaneously while occupying a 4th dimension that doesn't exist. He gripped his restraints as the impossible physics continued. This goes beyond advanced flying into something that transcends normal reality. Williams watched the external cameras as enemy fighter pilots tried desperately to target an aircraft that appeared to be in multiple positions at once. Those enemy pilots are firing at ghost images while we slip between their targeting solutions. He studied the tactical readouts, showing their impossible flight path. This phantom pilot is operating with capabilities that redefine what we understand about aircraft performance. The aircraft suddenly accelerated through a gap in the defensive screen that had been created by the phantom pilot's manipulation of enemy firing patterns. Torres felt the forces build beyond anything human physiology should survive, yet somehow the aircraft's systems were protecting them from the crushing effects. We're experiencing forces that should liquefy our internal organs, but we're conscious and functional. The enemy's most advanced surface-to-air missile system locked onto their position and fired a salvo of 6 missiles with proximity fuses designed to ensure destruction even with near misses. Chun watched the missiles approach and calculated that their combined blast radius would create an inescapable kill zone. Those missiles are designed to destroy entire formations of aircraft. No single plane can survive that level of explosive force. The phantom pilot's response came as the missiles reached terminal guidance phase. SEAL Team Bravo, final evasion sequence initiating now. Recommend securing all personnel for reality distortion maneuvers. Rodriguez had barely processed the warning when the aircraft seemed to exist in multiple probability states simultaneously, each one drawing missile targeting while the actual aircraft slipped through spaces that existed between the enemy's firing solutions. We're not evading missiles. We're making them target probability ghosts while we exist in the spaces between their calculations. Morrison was monitoring the aircraft systems through the passenger interface, watching readings that fluctuated beyond the measurement capabilities of the instruments. Our energy signatures are shifting across multiple frequency spectrums simultaneously. He looked around at his teammates with growing amazement. This Phantom pilot is operating technology that manipulates fundamental forces of physics. The pursuing enemy fighters fired their final salvo of air-to-air missiles, launching 8 advanced weapons with multiple targeting modes designed to guarantee destruction. Williams counted the incoming threats and shook his head in resignation. Those missiles have overlapping kill zones that cover every possible escape vector. Even if this Phantom pilot has been performing miracles, there's nowhere to go. Torres felt the aircraft begin to move in ways that his mind simply refused to process, as if they were slipping sideways through reality while enemy weapons converged on their position from every conceivable angle. These maneuvers are violating not just physics, but the basic structure of three-dimensional space. He watched the tactical displays show impossible flight patterns. We're moving through dimensions that don't exist in normal reality. The Phantom pilot's voice came through the intercom as they executed the final sequence of their escape. SEAL Team Bravo, exiting threat zone in 10 seconds. Prepare for transition to normal flight parameters. The demonstration phase is now complete. Chen watched through the windows as enemy weapons fire past harmlessly through spaces they had occupied moments before, while their aircraft emerged from the defensive screen completely unscathed. Demonstration phase? He looked at his teammates with dawning understanding. This Phantom pilot wasn't just trying to save us. They were showing us capabilities that shouldn't exist. Kozlov felt the aircraft's movements return to something approaching normal flight dynamics as they cleared the enemy defensive zone, but the implications of what they had just witnessed were staggering. He looked around at his team members, seeing the same mixture of awe and terror in every face. They had just experienced flying that transcended every known limitation of aircraft performance and human capability, and their Phantom pilot had referred to it as merely a demonstration of what was possible. Rodriguez unbuckled his restraints and moved toward the cockpit area, desperate to finally see the face of the pilot who had just redefined everything they understood about flight. Phantom 17, we need to know who you are and what organization has access to technology this advanced. What we just witnessed goes beyond classified into the realm of impossible. The aircraft settled into level flight as they cleared the enemy defensive zone, its movements returning to something that resembled conventional aerodynamics after the reality-bending demonstration they had just witnessed. Kozlov unbuckled his restraints and stood on unsteady legs, his mind still struggling to process the impossible maneuvers that had saved their lives. The tactical displays showed clear airspace ahead, but the questions multiplying in his head demanded immediate answers. Rodriguez was already moving toward the cockpit area, his combat training overridden by desperate curiosity about their mysterious rescuer. Phantom 17, we've just witnessed flying capabilities that violate every known law of physics and aircraft performance. He stopped at the barrier separating the passenger compartment from the pilot area. Who are you, and what organization has access to technology this advanced? The Phantom pilot's response came through the intercom, maintaining that same unnerving calm despite having just performed maneuvers that redefined reality itself. SEAL Team Bravo, operational security protocols require maintaining pilot anonymity during active missions. Focus on reaching friendly territory safely. Chen struggled to his feet despite his wounded shoulder, the adrenaline from their impossible escape temporarily overriding his pain. Operational security? He called toward the cockpit. We just witnessed capabilities that go beyond any known military technology. Those maneuvers weren't just advanced flying. They were manipulations of space and time itself. Morrison joined Rodriguez near the cockpit barrier, his years of military experience providing no framework for understanding what they had experienced. Phantom 17, in 15 years of special operations, I've worked with every classified program in the military. Nothing we've been briefed about comes close to what you just demonstrated. Williams was studying the aircraft's internal systems, trying to understand the technology that had enabled their impossible escape. These instruments and interfaces represent decades of advancement beyond anything in our current inventory. He looked back at his teammates. This Phantom pilot is operating equipment that shouldn't exist for another 50 years. Torres moved to join the group near the cockpit, his technical background making him desperate to understand the systems he had witnessed. The energy manipulation and spatial distortion capabilities we just experienced require technology that transcends our current understanding of physics. He addressed the pilot directly. What research program developed these capabilities? The Phantom pilot's voice carried a hint of something that might have been amusement. SEAL Team Bravo, your security clearances do not extend to experimental aerospace programs operating under special access protocols. Continue to focus on mission completion rather than classified technology assessment. Rodriguez pressed closer to the cockpit barrier, trying to get any visual confirmation of their pilot's identity. Special access protocols that exceed SEAL Team clearance levels? He looked back at Kozlov with obvious frustration. Sarge, we're dealing with technology and capabilities that are decades beyond anything we've been told exists. Chun was examining the tactical displays, which continued to show flight parameters that seemed impossible according to conventional aircraft performance specifications. Our flight recorder data from the past 30 minutes will require classification levels that don't exist in current military protocols. He turned toward the cockpit. Phantom 17. What organization has authority to operate technology this advanced without coordination with Special Operations Command? Morrison was calculating the implications of what they had witnessed for military strategy and technology development. If these capabilities exist within our military structure, they represent a fundamental shift in air superiority and combat effectiveness. He addressed the pilot directly. How long has this technology been operational, and why isn't it integrated into standard military operations? The aircraft's communication systems activated, indicating an incoming transmission from friendly forces. Williams monitored the signal and looked up at his teammates. We're being contacted by our Extraction Coordination Center. They're requesting confirmation of our status and estimated arrival time. Torres was still studying the aircraft's performance data, trying to understand the energy systems that had enabled their impossible escape. The power requirements for those spatial distortion maneuvers should have required multiple nuclear reactors. He looked around at the compact aircraft interior. How is this pilot generating and controlling energy levels that exceed our current technological capabilities? The Phantom pilot responded to the incoming communication while addressing the team's growing demands for information. SEAL Team Bravo, preparing to transfer you to friendly forces in 12 minutes. Recommend preparing final gear check and mission debriefing preparation. All questions regarding aircraft capabilities and pilot identity will be addressed through appropriate command channels. Rodriguez turned back to his teammates with obvious frustration. Appropriate command channels that we've never been briefed about and security clearances that exceed our current access levels. He shook his head. This Phantom pilot is operating completely outside our normal military command structure. Kozlov finally approached the cockpit barrier, his leadership responsibilities requiring him to demand answers for his team. Phantom 17. My team has just experienced capabilities that redefine our understanding of military technology and human performance. We need to know who we're dealing with and what organization has access to these capabilities. Chun supported himself against the bulkhead, his wounded shoulder reminding him of the desperate situation they had escaped. Without this Phantom pilot, we would all be dead in that enemy defensive zone. He looked toward the cockpit with a mixture of gratitude and desperate curiosity. But what we witnessed goes beyond rescue into demonstration of capabilities that shouldn't exist. The Phantom pilot's voice came through the intercom one final time before they began their approach to friendly territory. SEAL Team Bravo, prepare for transfer to conventional aircraft in 8 minutes. All operational questions will be resolved through proper debriefing channels. Your mission priority is now safe return to base for medical attention and situation reporting. The aircraft began its descent toward the friendly airbase, its approach so smooth that the landing gear deployment was barely perceptible to the passengers. Kozlov watched through the windows as familiar military installations came into view, but the contrast between the conventional base below and the reality-defying technology that had rescued them made everything seem surreal. The Phantom pilot had maintained complete anonymity throughout their escape, but something in the aircraft's approach pattern suggested that revelation was finally approaching. Rodriguez pressed against the cockpit barrier one final time, his frustration with their pilot's secrecy reaching its breaking point. Phantom 1-7. We're approaching friendly territory, and our mission is complete. Your operational security protocols should allow identity disclosure now that we're safe. The Phantom pilot's response came with a subtle change in tone, as if a decision had been made to finally provide the answers the team desperately sought. SEAL Team Bravo, prepare for pilot identity disclosure upon landing. Your debriefing will require understanding the full scope of the program that enabled your extraction. Chun felt his heart rate accelerate despite his exhaustion and pain from the shoulder wound. Finally, he looked around at his teammates, seeing the same anticipation reflected in every face. After witnessing capabilities that redefined everything we understand about military technology, we're going to learn who possesses these abilities. Morrison was studying the base layout through the windows, noting the unusual activity levels and security protocols visible around their designated landing area. Sarge, look at those ground personnel positioning. Those aren't standard extraction support teams. He pointed toward figures moving with precision that suggested specialized training. Whatever program this Phantom pilot represents, it has significant resources and authority. Williams was monitoring the aircraft's final approach, watching systems that continued to operate with the same impossible efficiency they had witnessed throughout their rescue. Even our landing approach is demonstrating capabilities beyond normal aircraft performance. He looked toward the cockpit with growing amazement. This Phantom pilot has been operating at levels that transcend human limitations for the entire mission. The aircraft touched down with the same supernatural gentleness they had experienced during their initial extraction, the landing so smooth that the transition from flight to ground operations was barely noticeable. Torres unbuckled his restraints and prepared to finally meet their mysterious rescuer. After everything we've witnessed, I'm not sure what to expect from this revelation. The engines wound down with a sound unlike any military aircraft the team had encountered, and the cockpit systems began to power down in sequences that seemed choreographed for maximum efficiency. Rodriguez watched the pilot preparation process through the barrier, seeing movements that suggested their rescuer was finally preparing to reveal themselves. The Phantom pilot's voice came through the intercom for what would be the final time during their mission. SEAL Team Bravo, mission complete. Preparing for pilot identity disclosure and program briefing. Recommend maintaining operational security regarding capabilities witnessed until proper debriefing protocols are completed. Chun struggled to his feet as the aircraft's cargo bay began to open, revealing ground support personnel who moved with the precision and authority of elite military units. Those aren't regular base personnel. He watched the approaching figures with growing curiosity. Everyone responding to our arrival has classification levels that match the technology we've experienced. Morrison was gathering his gear when he noticed something that made him freeze in place. Sarge, look at the insignia on those ground support uniforms. Those aren't from any military branch we've worked with before. He pointed toward the approaching personnel. This Phantom pilot represents an organization that operates completely outside normal military command structure. The cockpit canopy began to open with a hydraulic system so quiet it was barely audible, and Kozlov felt his breath catch as their mysterious rescuer finally prepared to reveal themselves. After witnessing flying capabilities that violated physics and technology that transcended current military systems, the identity of their Phantom pilot would either explain everything or deepen the mystery beyond comprehension. Williams was positioned where he could see the cockpit area most clearly, and what he observed as the canopy opened made him grab Rodriguez's arm in amazement. The pilot configuration and equipment setup looks like something from decades in the future. He watched their rescuer begin to emerge from systems that seemed more science fiction than military reality. Torres was studying the aircraft's final shutdown procedures, noting that even the power-down sequence demonstrated technology integration beyond anything in current military inventory. This Phantom pilot has been operating equipment that represents a quantum leap beyond our current capabilities. He looked toward the emerging figure with desperate curiosity. The Phantom pilot stood up in the cockpit, and for the first time during their entire mission, the SEAL team could see the person who had saved their lives through impossible demonstrations of flying skill and advanced technology. Rodriguez pressed closer to the barrier, finally able to observe their mysterious rescuer directly. Chun felt his wounded shoulder forgotten as anticipation overwhelmed his physical discomfort. After everything we've witnessed, the identity of this Phantom pilot will either explain capabilities that transcend normal human limitations or reveal that we've encountered something beyond our current understanding of military technology. The figure in the cockpit began to remove their flight helmet, and Kozlov realized that the next few moments would determine whether their rescue had been accomplished by advanced human capability or something that transcended the boundaries of current military science. The Phantom pilot, who had violated physics and redefined reality, was finally preparing to reveal the truth behind abilities that had saved 6 lives through demonstrations of impossible skill. Morrison watched the helmet removal process, knowing that their Phantom pilot's identity would provide answers to questions that had accumulated throughout their miraculous escape from certain death. The flight helmet came off, and Kozlov felt his world shift as he stared at the face of their Phantom pilot. Commander Elena Vasquez removed her flight gear with movements that carried the same supernatural precision they had witnessed throughout their impossible rescue. Her dark hair fell to her shoulders as she turned toward them, revealing features that belonged to someone barely 30 years old, far too young to possess the capabilities they had experienced. Rodriguez pressed against the cockpit barrier, his voice filled with disbelief. "Commander, you look like you're barely old enough to have completed basic flight training, let alone master technology that transcends known physics. How is someone your age operating capabilities that our most experienced pilots have never encountered?" Commander Vasquez stepped out of the cockpit with fluid grace, her movements suggesting physical conditioning that went beyond normal military standards. "SEAL Team Bravo, I am Commander Elena Vasquez, lead pilot for Project Phantom Wing, a classified aerospace program developing next-generation flight systems." She gestured toward the aircraft that had saved their lives. "What you experience today represents 15 years of technological development that remains decades ahead of conventional military systems." Chin stared at the commander, trying to reconcile her youthful appearance with the godlike flying abilities they had witnessed. "Commander, the maneuvers you performed violated fundamental laws of physics. You manipulated space and time to avoid incoming fire." He gestured toward the aircraft's sophisticated systems. "How does someone achieve capabilities that transcend normal human limitations?" Morrison approached the commander with obvious amazement, his years of military experience providing no framework for understanding what they had encountered. "Ma'am, in 15 years of special operations, I've never witnessed flying skills that approach what you demonstrated. Those weren't just advanced maneuvers. They were manipulations of reality itself." Commander Vasquez smiled with quiet confidence that explained everything they had witnessed during their rescue. Project Phantom Wing represents the integration of advanced neural interface technology with experimental aircraft systems. She touched a small device behind her ear that had been hidden by her flight helmet. This neural link allows direct mental control of aircraft systems, creating response times that appear to violate physics, but actually represent perfect synchronization between human consciousness and machine capability. Williams examined the neural interface device with growing understanding. "That explains the impossible reaction times and spatial awareness. You weren't just flying the aircraft, you were thinking the aircraft through three-dimensional space." He looked around at his teammates. The commander was operating in direct mental contact with systems that could respond faster than normal human reflexes. Torres studied Commander Vasquez with technical fascination, finally understanding the source of capabilities that had seemed supernatural. The neural interface technology allows you to process multiple threat streams simultaneously while controlling aircraft systems at the speed of thought. He gestured toward the advanced cockpit configuration. You weren't performing impossible maneuvers. You were thinking in multiple dimensions while the aircraft responded to your mental commands. Commander Vasquez nodded as ground support personnel approached to assist with their debriefing process. Project Phantom Wing has been developing these capabilities for over a decade, integrating the most advanced pilots with experimental aircraft designed to operate beyond conventional performance parameters. She looked at each team member individually. What you witnessed today represents the future of military aviation, where the boundary between pilot and aircraft disappears completely. Rodriguez shook his head in amazement as the implications of what they had experienced became clear. Commander, you saved our lives using technology that represents a quantum leap beyond current military capabilities. Those enemy defensive systems were designed to stop conventional aircraft, but you were operating in dimensions they couldn't target. Chun felt his wounded shoulder as medical personnel approached, but his attention remained focused on the commander who had redefined everything he understood about flying. Ma'am, your neural interface technology and advanced aircraft systems represent capabilities that could revolutionize military operations. How long before these systems become available to conventional military units? Commander Vasquez accepted a briefing tablet from one of the ground support personnel, her movements still carrying that supernatural precision that had characterized her flying. Project Phantom Wing remains in experimental phases, with only a select number of pilots qualified for neural interface integration. She looked at the SEAL team with obvious respect. Your extraction today served as both a rescue operation and a field test of our capabilities under maximum stress conditions. Morrison realized that their desperate situation had provided the perfect testing environment for technology that transcended normal military systems. Commander, you used our life-or-death scenario to demonstrate capabilities that represent the future of military aviation. Those impossible maneuvers weren't just rescue operations. They were proof of concept demonstrations. Williams approached Commander Vasquez with genuine gratitude, mixed with professional curiosity. Ma'am, your neural interface technology and advanced aircraft systems saved 6 lives today while demonstrating capabilities that redefine what's possible in military aviation. How do we recommend personnel for Project Phantom Wing qualification? Commander Vasquez smiled as medical personnel prepared to escort Chun for treatment of a shoulder wound. Project Phantom Wing selects candidates based on specific neural compatibility requirements and advanced flight aptitude assessments. She looked at each team member. Your performance under extreme stress conditions today will be noted in our candidate evaluation database. Torres gathered his gear while processing the technological implications of what they had experienced. Commander, the neural interface technology and experimental aircraft systems represent decades of advancement compressed into operational capability. How many pilots have achieved your level of integration with these systems? Commander Vasquez prepared to accompany them to the debriefing facility, her presence still carrying the same commanding authority they had experienced during their impossible rescue. Currently, Project Phantom Wing has 7 qualified pilots operating various experimental aircraft configurations. She gestured toward the advanced aircraft that had saved their lives. Each pilot represents years of training and neural adaptation to achieve seamless integration with these systems. If you enjoyed this story, please drop a comment and let us know your favorite part, or if you've had a similar situation where someone unexpected came to your rescue. Kozlov looked back at the aircraft that had carried them through impossible maneuvers, then at Commander Vasquez, who had demonstrated capabilities that transcended normal human limitations. Ma'am, your neural interface technology and Project Phantom Wing represent the future of military aviation. Today, you didn't just save our lives. You showed us what becomes possible when human consciousness merges perfectly with advanced technology.